Well, good day. This is Bill Boerum, and speaking with Professor Alexander Saburov at the Northern Arctic University in Archangel, Russia. So welcome. Thanks for being available, Alexander.
Hello, Bill. Thanks for inviting.
Very good. Well, we're going to be talking today about the Northern Sea Route, which has been spoken of increasingly in recent years, but also it surfaced again at the time that the Suez Canal was blocked. And it drew attention to the fact that so much world trade and cargo shipping moved through Suez. And for many Far Eastern ports and countries, it's a long trip all the way over through the Suez Canal and other waterways, the Mediterranean Sea to Europe and other places in between. And it drew attention to the fact that for Far Eastern countries in Asia, the Northern Sea Route can have an advantage. So in terms of mileage, and we will talk about why that is today. So Alexander, this is a subject that you have spent some time working on. What are some of your activities, whether it's articles you've published or forums you've attended? What have been the nature of your activities?
Hello, Bill. Yes, actually, I'm working at the Northern Arctic Federal University in Russia. Here I'm the director for the Institute for the Strategic Development of the Arctic. Our main activities consist of two main issues. Very different, quite. One of them is the organization of the Arctic expeditions, marine expeditions, which is called Arctic Floating University, where researchers and students and PhD students from Russia and other countries are working together in the high latitudes of the Arctic, working on the research, mostly in the environmental sciences. So our institute is organizing these expeditions. Another part of our work is expertise, social, economic development of the Arctic, which is provided to the university itself, to the government, mostly governments of Russia, Ministry of Development of the Far East and the Arctic, the Ministry of Science and Higher Education.
Well, very good. You're quite appropriate and correct in pointing out that the whole subject of using the Arctic waters and the Arctic itself has become increasingly a focus, and certainly in Russia. And we'll get into a little bit of that a little bit later, some of the organizations that are involved with that. But for the moment, let's talk about the Northern Sea Route. So if you could describe in geographical terms where this stretches from. I know probably those people would surmise that it's basically the northern coast of Russia as it faces northward to the Arctic. So which land masses or bodies of water starting in the west, where does this start and where does it end?
Well, actually, there are two concepts of the Northern Sea Route. One of them is mostly widespread among the general public, and in this sense, Northern Sea Route is considered as a way from Asia to Europe as a marine way, which comes through the Arctic Ocean and the northern coast of the Russian Federation. But there is also a legal, also to say more professional concept of the Northern Sea Route, which is described in the legislation, in the especially Russian merchant shipping code. And in this sense, the Northern Sea Route is considered as a way from the archipelago Novaya Zemlya and straits which connect Novaya Zemlya with Vaigach Island and the Russian mainland. It's on the western part, and on the eastern part is the Cape Dizhnyov, or the Bering Strait, which borders with actually America, with Alaska. And this is the western and eastern borders of the Northern Sea Route. The southern border of the Northern Sea Route territory is the Russian mainland, and the northern border of the Northern Sea Route is the northern border of the exclusive economic zone of the Russian Federation. So it's 200 nautical miles from the baselines, as according to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. And actually, this is Convention on the Law of the Sea, which presumes this possibility of legal identification of the Northern Sea Route, because there is an Article 234 which allows a coastal state to have a special regime, especially permission regime, for the waters which are covered by the ice for the most time of the year, in order to ensure the protection, especially of the environment. So the Russia, using this article, is introduced this Northern Sea Route territory, which has a special legal regime which requires a permission for any vessel which is going to this territory, first of all. And the second important thing is that the only Russian icebreakers could obligatorily provide the icebreaker assistance on this route. So this is also speciality of this regime of the Northern Sea Route in this narrow legal notion. So we should, definitely separate to these concepts.
Well, thanks very much for those definitions. I think it is critical to realize that as a practical matter, this is in Russian jurisdiction and acknowledged by international law, as you say. Of course, if you proceed, the more you proceed beyond the 200 miles, presumably from a layman's standpoint, the colder it will be, and there'll be more ice. I mean, maybe there's almost the same amount of ice, but if you try to go beyond the Russian economic zone and the 200 miles, you're just going to run into more ice and frigid conditions. And also, you won't have the help of the icebreakers, the Russian icebreakers. So that's my interpretation. So just momentarily looking more to the west and near Archangel, what are the conditions in the White Sea, which is near where you are? Is that likewise the Arctic and coastal waters becoming more ice-free, the White Sea?
The Arkhangelsk is still a freezing port, if we can say in such a way. So that means that the White Sea is covered by the ice during the winter. Actually, only several days ago we had the big river, which is called Northern Dvina River, free of ice finally. But there are still ice in the White Sea, of course. And in this sense, the Barents Sea is much more ice-free, especially in its western part, and the Scandinavian part and the Murmansk is the ice-free port the all year round. And more we come to the east, the more harsh are ice conditions. And if we look at the Northern Sea Route itself, in the legal terms, we'll see that it is more or less ice-free only around 60 days in a year, and there are still a lot of misunderstanding concerning the possible impacts of global climate change, and there are still, you can read a lot of news in the media which say that the Northern Sea route will be ice-free like very soon. But if we study the climatologist predictions, it's not as easy, and it's not as clear as it states to be in the media. And many predictions, the Northern Sea route will be in 30 years only around 90 days ice-free, which actually doesn't mean that you won't need any icebreaker and you could go onto any type of vessel, because you will still have a lot of drifting ice, which can be dangerous for a vessel. And it is quite good that there is a polar code adopted by International Maritime Organization, which presumes a special requirements for the vessels in terms of the ice class. So my main message in these terms is that the situation changes, but there is still quite a harsh ice conditions, especially in the winter and in the springtime.
Well, I really appreciate those qualifications, because as you point out, in popular outlook or popular knowledge, they think everything's going to be melting and the waters will be free. And that's not the case. And I appreciate also about, your reference to the predictions or projections, if you will. Even that 90 days is not that much in a full year's time. So there are some practical limitations. As to the governance of the route, if you will, the Arctic Council, has its permanent members and other members, the Arctic countries. So does the Arctic Council, what's the role of the Arctic Council with reference to, or has that council convened on the Northern Sea route as a topic?
Well, actually, yes and no at the same time. In terms of the legal aspects and the legal requirements for the shipping itself, of course, the International Maritime Organization has a mandate to put a special requirements on the shipping. And the Arctic Council, on the contrary, it's not an international organization in this sense, because it's more like an international forum which joins different states, coastal states, Arctic states, non-Arctic states, in order to ensure, first of all, the environmental protection, mostly, of course, and people-to-people cooperation, more than to engage in the legal regulation of the shipping on the Northern Sea route. However, Arctic Council has proved itself for the last 25 years. It was created in exactly 1996. A very good instrument for developing a joint vision on the most important aspects connected with climate and with the environmental protection within the Arctic itself. And one of the many achievements of the Arctic Council is adopting 3 intergovernmental agreements, which are dedicated to the oil spills in the Arctic Ocean. and search and rescue in the Arctic. And these agreements, all they are not Arctic Council regulations, but these agreements were a result of the work within the Arctic Council. And in this sense, it of course it still plays a big role in providing and in ensuring the good example of good governance based on the evidence-based policy making and research. And it is a really good achievement taking into consideration a very sensitive ecosystems of the Arctic region.
Right. Well put. Also, I have some friends that are in Siberia, specifically in Yakutsk, who participate. In fact, I think they're going to a meeting right now of something called the Northern Forum. Now, is that just a Russian organization, or is it other countries? And that is, I guess, what you'd call a non-governmental, an NGO, non-governmental organization, so that they convene as well to give a voice, perhaps, to indigenous people. Is that part of what they do? The Northern Forum?
Well, actually, yeah, the Northern Forum is a good example of the cooperation on the regional and municipal level, and as well on the level of the non-commercial sector. However, I would point out that the indigenous people are quite well represented, and I would say empowered on the level of the Arctic Council, because 6 indigenous organizations, including the Russian Association of Indigenous People, are the permanent members of the Arctic Council. And of course, this is, in my view, also like very important when we analyze the work of the Arctic Council, both of the Northern Forum, since the topic of communities, especially of indigenous people, they are quite much affected both by the recent climate changes and of the recent increase of the economic activity.
Right. Well, turning back more to the Northern Sea Route itself, does Russia have any ability or does Russia collect any toll for passage along the Northern Sea Route? Obviously, in the case of a canal, you have to pay a toll or a fee for ships to pass through. So is that the case with the Northern Sea Route? Is there a traffic fee or paid?
Well, literally speaking, no. There is not such a toll as on the Suez Canal, where for the one ship you have to pay several $100,000 of US dollars. There is no such case in the Northern Sea Route, but anyway, the charges for the icebreaker assistance, they're quite high. And taking into consideration the fact that most of the icebreakers used on the Northern Sea Route are nuclear icebreakers, which are both powerful and quite expensive, you could say that this makes Northern Sea Route quite expensive. Moreover, take into account the higher insurance fees for the Northern Sea Route. Here, actually, we should stress one very important thing. The Northern Sea Route is usually considered as a transit way from Asia to Europe. However, if we look on the cargo turnover of the Northern Sea Route, we'll see that most of the cargo is connected with exporting of the Russian energy, natural resources to Europe and a little bit less to Asia. So this, I would say, internal meaning of the Northern Sea route for Russia, this is much, much higher than the very widely discussed perspectives of the transit shipping and the alternative to the Suez Canal.
All right, so it's more heavily used for Russian transportation than current.
For example, for the 2020, the whole turnover of the Northern Sea route was about 33 million of tons, of which the transit shipping is a little bit more than 1 million of tons. So you see that it's well around 3%, and even more, I would say, if you look at the numbers of the transit for the last years, 2018, 2019, you'll see that it is even less. It's 400,000 tons or 600,000 tons, and now compare it with the Suez Canal freight turnover, which is around 1 billion of tons, which is of course much more than the Northern Sea route.
Absolutely right. Well, that's a very good note of realism to be introduced here. So the popular misconception of what's transiting now. So that I'm glad that you pointed that out. I was curious about that. Yeah, and as far as the icebreaker fees, presumably that's paid if you need the assistance, you call for the assistance, or is that some kind of, for any passage of a ship, you have to pay to underwrite the total fees, or is it only on an as needed basis that it is expensive?
In terms of the icebreaker fees, there are special regulations which are developed by the administration of the Northern Sea route. This is the agency under the Ministry of Transport, and there is quite clear regulations on what class of vessel in what period needs an icebreaker assistance. So of course for example, ice class tanker with a high ice class, which brings, for example, liquefied natural gas from Yamal Peninsula. In many cases, it doesn't need an icebreaker. For example, in the February 2021, this year, there was a first ever example of the LNG tanker coming from Sabetta. This is a big port on the Yamal Peninsula, to the eastern part of the Northern Sea route to the Asian countries. And they did it without any icebreaker assistance. So like, I didn't need, but please take into consideration that the ice class of this tanker is quite high. It's almost an icebreaker, I would say itself.
Right. Yeah, certainly given its weight and forward movement, you know, it can get through virtually any ice, or it's equivalent to an icebreaker, as you say. Are pilots ever employed? You know, sometimes when you come into a small harbor with any size ship, a small boat comes out and a man comes from that boat of the port, and he's the so-called pilot, and he steers the ship into the port. Is that the case at all in the Northern Sea route, that are pilots brought on board to assist the captain, or is the captain qualified to take the vessel all the way through?
Well, exactly. In most cases, you need air pilot assistance, and yeah, this pilotage is, to my knowledge, is not something exceptional from the situation out of the Northern Sea route, because here, for example, in the harbor of Arkhangelsk, you also need a pilot to come to Arkhangelsk or come out of the port of Arkhangelsk. So yes, it's a normal practice.
Right. Yes. Well, along the route, is it possible, or are there currently any ports of call? In other words, are there ports that might develop along the route, along the Russian coast, or basically, do the ships just go all the way through? Is there any opportunity, any economic opportunity for some ports to develop? It's a long route. So are there any ports along the way, even if 2 or 3?
Actually, from the times of the Soviet Union, a number of ports on the Arctic Ocean coast were developed. These are ports of, for example, Tiksi in Yakutia, or Pevek in Chukotka, or Dixon on Taimyr Peninsula, and they played an important role in the organization of the Northern Sea route in the Soviet times. Now the situation is quite different. Mostly the ports which are connected with the extraction and shipment of oil and gas resources and other natural resources shipment are developing. One of them I already called, this is Sabetta on the Yamal Peninsula. This is a big port and a big settlement with LNG plant, and at the same time this liquefied natural gas is shipped to the tankers, as I call, and it's developing really fast. It's a big port with international airport and with more than 15,000 of people working there. Here we can also mention the, for example, port of Dudinka on the Yenisei River, which is a port where the shipment of Norilsk nickel production is made, especially on the ore which is produced near the Norilsk. As for the other ports, we don't take Arkhangelsk and Murmansk because they are legally not on their way of the Northern Sea route. And Narimir, I wouldn't say that there are really big ports of coal. If to try to forecast what happens if the Northern Sea route develops as the transit shipping route, of course, in this case, the development of port infrastructure is highly needed, because the only deep water port on the Russian Arctic is Murmansk. This is the only deep water port. And in order to make the Northern Sea route really working, you have to make a number of ports with infrastructure which could help bunkering, refueling, watering of the ships, and as well as the rescue infrastructure. In these terms, investments in this infrastructure could give a new life, in my view, to these ports. If compare the Northern Sea route with the southern, away from China to Europe, we could see that some of the ports in Asia, they are developing also because of this ports, because there is not only a cargo brought to Europe, but there is a cargo which is also brought to these Asian ports. But in these terms, I'm not sure that these Russian settlements in the very high north and in the Arctic, they have a good demand and a good number of population, which could ensure this demand in this cargo. So again, I think that the main perspective of these ports is the important bunkering and search and rescue ports.
Right. Well, that's a good distinction to make. Well, getting to the ports in the West, in Russia, I was going to ask you about the comparative advantages, disadvantages to Murmansk and Archangel. And I think you started to talk about that already, that Murmansk is really the only deep water port in the West on the Arctic coast. Is that right? How would you compare advantages, disadvantages to the two ports, or is it all pretty much favorable to Murmansk?
It really, the answer on this question depends on what goals you are trying to achieve when developing these ports. Murmansk currently is a bigger port, is historically a bigger port with much more freight turnover, around 6 times more than Arkhangelsk, if I'm not mistaken. And the nature of cargo brought by these ports is very different now as well. Murmansk is the port with natural resources, coal shipment. Arkhangelsk is mostly the port of connected with the general freight, which is used by military, for example, by hydrometeorological service in order to supply the polar stations. For also Arkhangelsk is a port which was used in order to deliver building materials to this Sabetta, for example, port. So they're quite different, and in this sense, I don't think that there is a need for Arkhangelsk, for example, to be a competitor to Murmansk. However, for many years there was such a, we'll say, competition of different projects which could bring the Arkhangelsk as a deep water port as well. For example, the one of the most famous, of course, is Belkamur railway, the railway which a project which should have connected the Ural railways and like Siberian railways with Arkhangelsk, and which was considered as a way of shipping the cargo from Ural industrial region to Arkhangelsk and then to the European, for example, ports, or moreover, to ship the Chinese goods, first of all through the Trans-Siberian Railway, then to Arkhangelsk, and then to Europe. But it looks like this project will not work. There are not enough of investors who are interested in this project, because still it's not quite clear what cargo base will be loaded onto this railway. And of course, again, we remember that Arkhangelsk is still not a deep water port. There are some difficulties with making the harbor really deep. You should invest quite many funds in these activities. And still remember that Arkhangelsk is and will be an ice-freezing harbor, which also will need an additional funding for the icebreaker assistance.
Well, thanks for detailing all those factors, because just in looking at the map, it would seem to be a much longer railway distance from Murmansk down to, say, Moscow, and much shorter from Arkhangelsk down to the Urals. But as you point out, the main factors here are the nature of the ports themselves, and that Murmansk has advantages as a seaport, which the other city does not. I mean, it has, as you say, it's not really a competitive issue, just different economic activities, if you will. So are there any conferences coming up where the Northern Sea Route is something that's going to be discussed? Or is this again kind of the province of the Arctic Council and the Northern Forum to offer a convening location? So nothing specific.
Excuse me, have you asked about the conferences?
Yeah, is there anything coming up soon about this to discuss the Northern Sea Route?
If we talk about the international level of discussion,
yes,
I think the St. Petersburg Economic Forum will be one of the places. If, as far as I know, there are going to be a special session dedicated to the Arctic development. But I would think also of the conferences, which is called Arctic, the Territory of the Dialect, which will take place in St. Petersburg in 2022 and in 2023 as a part of the Russian chairmanship in the Arctic Council.
And would you repeat the name of that conference?
Arctic Territory of the Dialect.
Okay.
It is a high-level conference. Actually, Arkhangelsk was a host of these kind of conferences in 2011, 2017, and we had President Putin, for example, as the guest of this forum, the president of Iceland or Finland. So it's quite a high level event, and we will probably attend also high-level officials on this kind of forum in 2022 and in 2023.
Well, very good. I'm glad I asked that question about upcoming convenings on Arctic topics and on bringing in the Arctic Sea Route itself. Where would there be information, just in general terms, that would be accessible to the public? I mean, you have the Northern Sea Route Administration, which oversees what goes on there. Are there published statistics on this that one could access or not, to your knowledge?
Well, actually, Northern Sea Route Administration publishes the reports on the Northern Sea Route turnover, also the number of permissions given, the analysis in terms of transit, shipping, the type of cargos, and actually in the public media, this information is quite regularly published, and as well as in the expert and research articles. So this information generally is quite free and open. Like there is a number of experts in Russia who are involved in this topic much more than me, for example. Yes, I could recommend, for example, Mikhail Grigoriev from the Yekon company. He's quite a famous expert. And yes, this information is mostly open and available.
Well, very good. Well, that's encouraging. And I really want to thank you today for shedding a light of realism on the prospects of the Northern Sea Route and being able to better understand what the practical constraints are and the opportunities that may come in the future. So, Alexander, thank you very much. I will end the recording, but we may chat a bit following. So again, thank you very much indeed.